I'm a senior lecturer and researcher here at Otago Uni, and my kaupapa is Māori and Indigenous suicide prevention, mental health and wellbeing and hope, and I am recruiting. So I'm recruiting those of you who want to do masters and PhDs with me, and I'm already supervising a couple, but not in suicide prevention and not in hope. But I have some brilliant ideas for masters and PhD research, and I need you to come and see me, okay? I need you to come and see me because our research is nowhere near enough in terms of what we know about suicide prevention in our Indigenous and Māori population. So kia ora. Kia ora, ngā mihi aroha kia pētahi ki pētahi. I'm just saying my love to all of you and the important mahi that you're doing. It might be a small involvement in suicide prevention. It might be a still being conceived involvement in suicide prevention, but every single one of you is here because you need to be here. And as hard as some of the kōrero may be, some of the talk may be for some of you, I invite you to stay, to have the courage to sit through it, because we need to. We need to because our numbers are going up. And there is explanation for that exists outside the normal repertoires or explanations of risk and protective factors for suicide. So I'm here to talk about the relationship between colonisation and suicide. It's a hard one for some people to understand. Some of us have been quite comfortable in our lack of awareness about the genuine and real and ongoing impacts of colonisation. And we are all encouraged to believe or to attribute suicide, risk-taking behaviour, depression, psychopathology, or mental illness. We're all encouraged to look at that through a Western lens. Those of us who have been trained, I'm a trained psychologist, I'm a behavioural psychologist, I'm also an Indigenous psychologist, first and foremost, and I'm as far as I know, the only Māori suicidologist in the world. So we are trained in a certain way to put on a certain pair of glasses. And when I put on my Western trained glasses, I see mental illness, I see deviance, I see abnormality, I see pathology, but when I take them off, I see magnificence, I see whakapapa, I see our big expansive history and our kinship and our genealogy. I see my ancestors. I see the beauty in our young people, the beauty in us. And so I invite those of you who are not Māori to join hands with us and come on this journey with us. Okay, colonisation is the single most important explanatory factor for Māori and Indigenous suicide. And I'll talk about why in a minute by giving just a practical demonstration of what colonisation does. But colonisation began way back in the 1400s in the Catholic Church, and a series of documents called the Papal Bulls. These were directives to the people of the church, to those who were told to go forth and take lands and take resources and take language and missionise, Christianise Indigenous peoples all over the world. So colonisation has a basis in racism. There is no way that it can't or that it doesn't if we look at the long history and the outcomes for Indigenous peoples under colonisation. So colonisation is a system that privileges those who, first and foremost, who descend from the British monarchy. It also privileges those non-Indigenous peoples around the world. And those people are not people of colour. They are European people. This is the history and the story of colonisation. What I want to do to just demonstrate to you what colonisation does is to talk you through a bit of my own story. And I think it's really important that we're able to tell our stories in ways that make us stronger. As the people from the Dulwich Centre for Narrative Therapy will tell us, but as my tūpuna told me, we need to keep our stories alive, and that includes knowledge of who we are and of our whakapapa. Because in the process of colonisation, that knowledge of who we are, where we fit and how we connect is disrupted, kua ngarokie. So we arrive at a point of not knowing who we are, and worse than that, not being able to reconnect. So it's my role within my own whānau, with my toki tamaiti over here, Huriana, and my son and mokopuna, to keep that knowledge alive and to reconnect them. That's my role as a nanny, as a whaia, as a mum, as a grandmother. Okay, so all contemporary drivers of Māori suicide are anchored in colonisation, anchored in land loss, anchored in systems, anchored in systems that we've developed and given licence and legitimacy under colonisation. Aaron Huey, who's a white American photographer, talks about the domino effect of colonisation. What I'll do is I've started preparing a list of readings for you and some resources so that if you feel so inclined, and I encourage and support you to do this, you can educate yourselves in the privacy of your homes or your offices or wherever you are. So there's a domino effect. So from the time of colonisation, and one of the stories I remember is and this is a strategy used with our Lakota whānau, our Blackfeet Indian whānau, who whakapapa to Native America, our Samoan whānau, our Rarotongan whānau, was the infecting of blankets with infectious diseases that were then given as gifts to the tangata whenua, the indigenous people of those lands. And it happened here in Otikoti that the colour of the blankets is going to be changed from pink to brown. And there was a massive outcry, and the outcry was due to the fact that blankets infected with various diseases were given out, and those blankets were brown in colour. So there's so much that we don't know about our history here in Aotearoa. So much that's been kept from you, that's been kept from our children, that's been kept from our families. And once you know this stuff, then you have to make a decision. Am I going to stand up and do something about this? Am I going to make small changes in my own life to advocate for Indigenous peoples? Or am I just going to say, nah, history's history, let's forget about it and move on? And I'm not, okay. So intergenerational historical trauma, and we have a number of experts in the room. I'll give you a simple demonstration of what that is. But this, the theorising and the discourse and the kōrero has come from the work of a Jewish researcher called Mahi. And then that research who said that trauma comes down through generations. And we know that there's a thing called epigenetics. And epigenetics is that stress and trauma actually impact on our DNA. So that impacts on our DNA. So the research on that, there's a whole pile of research. If you, I can give you references and resources after this meeting. But so my Henrik noticed that the third generation kids of the grandchildren, the mokopuna, of those who went through the death camps, some who didn't come home, whole family lines that were wiped out. They have among the highest rates of mental illness in the world. And so she started to question why and started developing this kōrero around the impacts of historical trauma passed down through generations. So I'm going to, there's a lot of literature from Karina Walters, Maria Braveheart, Yellow Horse, Eduardo and Bonnie Duran. My PhD has a whole chapter on historical trauma. This is my nephew, Taiwhanga Chadwick, a graduate of psychology and Māori. Okay, I need you to, so I brought some people in to meet you. This is my great-grandfather, Arapeta Tiaho, who served in the Māori battalion in World War I, the Pioneer Battalion. And this is my kuia, Huriana, after whom Huriana, my daughter's name, 5 generations of women in my whānau, Huriana. Hara mai nef.
Lots of nephews.
Yeah. All my whāngai kids. So these two married in the early 1800s, okay? I haven't got a good memory for precise dates. But the early 1800s. And they lived on the banks, the shores of the Akaroa Harbour, what is now known as the Banks Peninsula, but our name for it is Te Pātaka o Rā Kaihautu. So they lived on the banks of the Moana and in a place called Te Pātaka o Rā Kaihautu, or we would know it, many of you would know it as the Banks Peninsula. She was the mokopuna of Wee Karaweko, or Big William, and Mere Whāriu, or Big Mary. He's from Kahungunu, Arapeta Tiaho, from Ngāti Pāhauwera.
Oh, yeah.
Aira. And from Ngāti Pāhauwera, and also from Tangoio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, anei oku tūpuna. She was 23 when she died of...